There is a sacred whisper moving through this moment right now. It is gentle, it is pure, and it is closer than your own breath. The Holy Spirit is not distant, He is not hiding, He is not silent. The real question is not whether He is speaking, but whether we have become quiet enough to hear Him. Many people believe that hearing the Holy Spirit is reserved for special moments, special places, or special people. They think it happens only in church services, during powerful prayers, or in rare spiritual encounters. But the Holy Spirit desires something far deeper and far more personal than that. He longs to speak to you every single day, in the ordinary moments of life, in the stillness between your thoughts, in the quiet places of your heart. The secret begins with surrender. You cannot hear the Holy Spirit clearly while your heart is crowded with your own will. As long as your plans, your fears, your ambitions, and your opinions dominate your inner life, His voice will feel distant. The Holy Spirit does not shout over the noise of self. He waits. He waits for the moment you gently lay down your need to control and say, "Not my will, but yours." Surrender is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. When you surrender, you are not losing yourself. You are finally allowing God to lead you into who you were always meant to be. The Holy Spirit speaks most clearly to a yielded heart, a heart that is open, soft, and willing to obey even before it understands. The second secret is stillness. We live in a world filled with constant sound, voices, notifications, opinions, and distractions that never stop. Yet the Holy Spirit speaks in a voice that is calm, tender, and easily missed by a hurried soul. If you rush through life, you will rush past His voice. Stillness is not empty silence. It is attentive silence. It is the posture of a heart that says, "I am listening." When you intentionally slow down, when you create space in your day to simply be aware of God's presence, something extraordinary happens. You begin to recognize His gentle nudges, His quiet warnings, His loving guidance. Sometimes He speaks through a deep inner peace, sometimes through a sudden heaviness that tells you not to move forward, sometimes through a simple thought that carries clarity and purity beyond your own reasoning. The more still you become, the more familiar His voice will sound. The third secret is holiness. The Holy Spirit is holy. He is sensitive. He is grieved by compromise, bitterness, pride, and hidden sin. This does not mean He abandons you when you fail, but it does mean that sin dulls your spiritual hearing. When the conscience is ignored repeatedly, the inner ear grows faint. A life that desires to hear the Holy Spirit daily must love what He loves and turn away from what wounds His heart. Holiness is not about perfection, it is about alignment. It is choosing purity over pleasure, humility over recognition, obedience over convenience. As your life aligns with His nature, His voice becomes clearer, stronger, and more consistent. Another powerful secret is obedience. The Holy Spirit speaks more when He is trusted. If He prompts you to forgive and you obey, He will speak again. If He urges you to step away from something harmful and you listen, His voice will grow clearer. But when His instructions are repeatedly ignored, the heart becomes hesitant, uncertain, and confused. Obedience sharpens spiritual sensitivity. Every act of obedience tunes your heart more precisely to His frequency. You begin to recognize His voice not because it is loud, but because it is familiar. Finally, the greatest secret of all is love. The Holy Spirit is not merely a guide. He is a companion. He desires relationship, not routine. He wants to walk with you, speak with you, and share life with you. When you love Him, when you cherish His presence more than results or experiences, you will naturally hear Him. Love makes you attentive. Love makes you sensitive. Love makes you listen. When you wake up each morning with a heart that says, "I welcome you," the Holy Spirit will not remain silent. When you move through your day aware that He is near, your spirit will begin to catch His whispers. When you end your day in gratitude, reflecting on His faithfulness, you will realize He has been speaking all along. The Holy Spirit is speaking today. He is speaking now. The secret is not learning how to make Him speak, but learning how to listen. A surrendered heart is not formed in a moment of emotion, but in a daily, deliberate yielding of the inner life to God. It begins when a person realizes that hearing the Holy Spirit is not about gaining information, but about releasing control. As long as the heart insists on its own way, its own timing, and its own understanding, the voice of the Spirit feels distant, not because He has withdrawn, but because surrender has not yet made room for Him. The Holy Spirit speaks most clearly where resistance has been laid down and pride has been gently crucified. Surrender requires trust, and trust grows when a person believes that God's will is not dangerous but loving. Many struggle to hear the Holy Spirit because they fear what He might ask of them. They worry He will take too much, demand too much, or lead them into loss. But surrender reveals a different truth. God never removes without replacing, never closes without opening, never asks without empowering. When the heart finally says, "I belong to you completely," fear loosens its grip and spiritual hearing becomes sharper. A surrendered heart listens differently. It no longer argues with divine impressions or negotiates with conviction. It does not rush to justify disobedience or delay obedience. Instead, it leans inward with humility, aware that the Spirit's guidance is always higher than human reasoning. This posture transforms prayer from a list of requests into a sacred exchange. Prayer becomes less about speaking and more about yielding, less about persuasion and more about alignment. True surrender is quiet. It does not announce itself or seek recognition. It often happens in unseen moments, when no one else is watching, when choices are made that honor God even at personal cost. In these moments, the Holy Spirit draws near with gentle assurance. His voice becomes recognizable not because it is dramatic, but because it carries peace, clarity, and authority without pressure. A surrendered heart feels His leading as a calm certainty rather than emotional excitement. The Holy Spirit is drawn to hearts that are soft, teachable, and honest. Surrender removes the need to appear strong, spiritual, or self-sufficient. It allows vulnerability before God, a willingness to admit weakness, confusion, and dependence. In that vulnerability, divine communication flows freely. The Spirit does not compete with self-confidence. He responds to humility. Where surrender lives, pride loses its voice, and spiritual discernment awakens. As surrender deepens, sensitivity increases. The heart begins to notice subtle warnings, gentle nudges, and quiet redirections that once went unnoticed. Decisions are no longer driven solely by logic or emotion, but by inner peace or restraint. The surrendered heart learns to pause before acting, to listen before responding, to wait before moving. In this waiting, the Holy Spirit speaks with precision, shaping desires, refining motives, and guiding steps without force. Surrender is not a one-time act, but a continuous posture. Each day presents new opportunities to reclaim control or to release it again. Each situation invites either self-rule or divine leadership. The more consistently the heart chooses surrender, the more naturally it hears the Spirit's voice woven into daily life, shaping thoughts, responses, and intentions from within rather than from external pressure. Stillness is not the absence of activity, but the quieting of the inner world where the Holy Spirit waits to be heard. Many hearts long for divine guidance, yet remain filled with restless thoughts, constant analysis, and emotional noise. The Spirit does not force His way through mental clutter. He speaks with gentleness, and His voice is recognized only when the soul learns how to be calm before God. Stillness is the atmosphere where spiritual awareness awakens. A hurried mind struggles to discern sacred impressions. When life moves too fast, everything begins to sound urgent, and the voice of the Holy Spirit is mistaken for background noise or ignored entirely. Stillness slows the pace of the heart, allowing divine whispers to rise above internal distractions. It creates a sacred pause, where listening becomes possible and presence becomes real. Learning stillness requires intentional withdrawal from constant stimulation. It means stepping away, even briefly, from endless input and demands. In those moments of quiet, the heart turns its attention inward, not to self, but to God. Thoughts begin to settle, emotions soften, and awareness shifts from external pressures to internal sensitivity. The Holy Spirit often speaks through a sense of peace, a gentle restraint, or a subtle clarity that emerges only when the soul is unhurried. Stillness teaches discernment. In quiet moments, the difference between personal thoughts and divine promptings becomes clearer. The Spirit's voice carries a purity that does not produce confusion or anxiety. It brings light rather than pressure. Stillness allows the heart to test impressions, to sense whether a thought brings peace or disturbance, freedom or heaviness. Without stillness, discernment becomes reactive and uncertain. In stillness, the Holy Spirit reveals what noise conceals. Hidden motives surface, unnecessary burdens are exposed, and emotional weight is gently lifted. The Spirit does not rush this process. He works patiently, allowing the heart to release what does not belong and receive what brings life. This quiet work cannot happen in constant motion. Stillness provides the space where inner healing and clarity begin. As stillness becomes a habit, sensitivity increases. The heart grows familiar with the Spirit's presence, recognizing Him not only in quiet prayer but throughout the day. Decisions feel different. Reactions soften. Words are measured. The inner life becomes governed by peace rather than impulse. Stillness trains the soul to listen even while moving, to remain attentive even while engaged. Stillness is an act of trust. It declares that God is not impressed by constant activity, but by availability. When the heart chooses to be still, it acknowledges that divine guidance is more valuable than immediate action. In that surrender, the Holy Spirit draws near, not with overwhelming power, but with intimate direction that shapes each step from within. Over time, stillness becomes a dwelling place rather than a moment. The heart learns to carry quietness within, unaffected by external chaos. In this inner stillness, the Holy Spirit's voice becomes familiar, steady, and dependable, guiding the soul with gentle authority in every season of life. Holiness is not a restriction placed on the believer, but a refinement of the inner life that makes spiritual hearing clearer and more precise. The Holy Spirit is holy by nature, and He communicates most freely where His nature is honored. When the heart chooses purity, alignment, and reverence, it becomes more receptive to divine impressions. Holiness is not about appearing spiritual outwardly, but about maintaining an inward posture that welcomes God's presence without resistance. Many struggle to discern the voice of the Holy Spirit because their inner world is crowded with compromises that dull sensitivity. Sin does not silence the Spirit, but it creates interference. Just as static disrupts a signal, unaddressed attitudes, hidden bitterness, pride, and repeated disobedience cloud spiritual perception. The Spirit remains present, yet His voice becomes harder to distinguish from personal desires and emotional reactions. Holiness clears the interference, restoring clarity to the inner ear. Holiness begins in the thoughts. What the mind dwells on shapes what the heart responds to. When thoughts are continually entertained that contradict God's nature, the conscience grows less responsive. But when the mind is guarded, when attention is directed toward what is pure and true, the Spirit becomes alert. The Holy Spirit often speaks through subtle impressions, and a disciplined inner life is better equipped to recognize them without confusion. The pursuit of holiness is an act of love, not fear. It is choosing what pleases God because His presence matters more than temporary satisfaction. This choice deepens intimacy. The Holy Spirit draws close to hearts that honor Him, not because they are flawless, but because they are sincere. Holiness reflects a desire to protect the relationship, to avoid what grieves the Spirit, and to remain sensitive to His movements within. As holiness increases, conviction becomes gentle yet precise. The Spirit corrects quickly, quietly, and lovingly. There is no need for dramatic warnings because the heart responds at the slightest nudge. A word, a thought, a pause is enough to redirect behavior. This sensitivity develops over time through consistent alignment. The heart learns to recognize discomfort not as condemnation, but as guidance meant to preserve peace and purity. Holiness also affects discernment in decision-making. Choices are no longer based solely on what is permissible, but on what is pleasing. The Spirit often guides not by clear commands, but by inward restraint or release. A holy heart senses when to step forward and when to withdraw, even without logical explanation. This discernment protects from paths that appear right outwardly, but lead away from God's best. Living a holy life requires humility. It acknowledges dependence on grace rather than self-discipline alone. The Holy Spirit empowers holiness. It is not achieved through willpower, but through cooperation. When the heart yields daily, inviting the Spirit to search, cleanse, and align, holiness becomes a natural outflow rather than a forced effort. The result is not heaviness, but freedom, clarity, and peace. As holiness becomes a way of life, the voice of the Holy Spirit grows familiar and trustworthy. Guidance comes with quiet authority. Direction feels steady rather than urgent. The inner life becomes clean, uncluttered, and responsive, allowing the Spirit to communicate with clarity and ease in every situation and season. Obedience is the language of trust that the Holy Spirit understands most clearly. When the Spirit speaks and the heart responds, a sacred exchange is established that deepens spiritual awareness. Hearing the Holy Spirit is not only about receiving guidance, but about honoring it. Every act of obedience strengthens the inner connection, making the next instruction easier to recognize and quicker to follow. Many desire clarity before they obey, but the Holy Spirit often asks for obedience before explanation. His guidance is frequently revealed step by step, not all at once. When the heart insists on full understanding before moving, it delays the flow of divine direction. Obedience demonstrates confidence in God's character, trusting that He leads with wisdom even when the path is not fully visible. The more consistently a person obeys, the more sensitive the heart becomes. Obedience sharpens discernment. It trains the inner ear to recognize the Spirit's tone, timing, and manner of speaking. What once felt uncertain begins to feel familiar. The Spirit's voice carries a distinct peace that becomes recognizable through repeated obedience, not intellectual study alone. Disobedience, even in small matters, dulls spiritual perception. When promptings are ignored, the heart grows hesitant and less responsive. The Spirit does not withdraw, but the individual becomes less attentive. Obedience restores attentiveness. Each time the heart responds, spiritual confidence increases and fear of missing God's will decreases. Obedience is often quiet and unseen. It may involve forgiving without acknowledgement, walking away from opportunities that appear attractive, or speaking truth when silence feels safer. These moments may not seem significant, but they carry eternal weight. The Holy Spirit values faithfulness over visibility. When obedience is practiced in private, spiritual authority is cultivated within. Through obedience, character is shaped. The Spirit uses simple instructions to refine attitudes, correct motives, and build integrity. What begins as an act of compliance becomes a transformation of desire. Over time, the heart begins to want what the Spirit wants. Obedience then flows naturally, not as obligation but as agreement. Obedience also brings protection. Many missteps are avoided not through foresight, but through heeding inner restraint. The Holy Spirit often warns quietly, creating a pause, a hesitation, or an unease. Those trained in obedience learn to respect these signals. This sensitivity shields the heart from unnecessary regret and spiritual compromise. As obedience becomes a lifestyle, the relationship with the Holy Spirit deepens. Communication becomes fluid and continuous. Guidance comes without strain. Direction feels personal and precise. The Spirit trusts the obedient heart with greater responsibility because it has proven faithful in smaller matters. The obedient heart does not rely on emotion to confirm direction. It moves forward in faith, grounded in peace rather than excitement. Over time, obedience produces confidence, clarity, and stability, creating a life guided not by impulse, but by divine wisdom working quietly from within. Love is the deepest doorway into daily awareness of the Holy Spirit's presence. Hearing Him is not primarily a skill to be mastered, but a relationship to be cherished. When love becomes the motivation, sensitivity increases naturally. The Holy Spirit responds to affection, not performance. Where love is genuine, attention follows, and where attention is focused, His voice is more easily recognized. Many approach spiritual guidance with intensity, but without intimacy. They seek direction yet neglect relationship. Love changes the posture of the heart. Instead of striving to hear, the heart begins to listen gently. Instead of demanding clarity, it rests in nearness. The Holy Spirit speaks freely to hearts that enjoy His presence, rather than merely consult Him for answers. Love produces attentiveness. When someone is deeply loved, even a whisper is heard. In the same way, intimacy with the Holy Spirit heightens perception. Small impressions become meaningful. Subtle nudges carry weight. Love trains the heart to notice, to value, and to respond. This attentiveness does not require effort. It flows naturally from desire. As love deepens, fear diminishes. Many struggle to hear the Holy Spirit because they are afraid of being corrected or redirected. Love removes this fear. Correction is no longer threatening but welcomed as care. Guidance is no longer resisted but trusted. The heart that loves the Spirit does not question His intentions because it knows His nature is gentle and faithful. Love also brings consistency. Relationship is not limited to moments of need. When love is present, communication continues throughout the day. The Holy Spirit is consulted not only in major decisions, but in small choices, conversations, and reactions. This ongoing awareness makes His voice familiar, woven into daily life rather than reserved for special occasions. Intimacy transforms obedience. What once felt like sacrifice becomes joy. The heart delights in pleasing the one it loves. Obedience becomes an expression of devotion rather than duty. The Holy Spirit responds to this devotion with deeper trust, sharing insights and guidance with a heart that values relationship above outcome. Love softens the inner life. Harshness, impatience, and resistance lose their hold. The heart becomes gentle, responsive, and open. In this softness, the Holy Spirit finds room to move freely. His voice does not compete with inattention. It flows easily through a heart at rest in love. As love matures, awareness of the Spirit's presence becomes constant. There is no need to strive to hear Him because the relationship itself creates sensitivity. His nearness is felt even in silence. His guidance is sensed even without words. Love creates an inner knowing that cannot be manufactured through effort or discipline alone. This intimacy reshapes the way life is lived. Decisions are influenced by a desire to remain close. Words are chosen carefully to preserve peace. Actions are guided by a longing to honor the relationship. The Holy Spirit becomes not only a guide but a companion, walking with the heart through every moment, shaping thoughts, emotions, and responses through the power of love working quietly within. Consistent awareness of the Holy Spirit transforms ordinary life into a continual dialogue with God. When awareness becomes a habit rather than an occasional practice, the boundary between sacred and ordinary begins to disappear. Daily moments, simple choices, and quiet thoughts become places where divine guidance is present. The Holy Spirit does not limit His communication to dramatic experiences. He desires to be acknowledged in every aspect of life. Awareness begins with recognition. It is the conscious acknowledgement that the Holy Spirit is present now, not arriving later. This recognition shifts the inner atmosphere. The heart becomes attentive without strain, alert without tension. Awareness is not forced concentration, but gentle remembrance. It is the quiet realization that one is never alone, never unguided, never disconnected from divine companionship. As awareness grows, perception sharpens. The heart begins to notice subtle shifts in peace, clarity, and restraint. Guidance is often communicated through these inner movements rather than audible words. A sense of ease signals alignment. A sudden pause signals caution. Awareness allows these signals to be recognized and respected. Without awareness, such guidance is easily overlooked or dismissed. Consistent awareness reshapes reactions. Instead of responding impulsively, the heart pauses inwardly. That pause creates space for the Holy Spirit to influence responses. Words are softened, attitudes adjusted, and actions refined. Awareness does not slow life down, it steadies it. The Spirit's presence becomes an anchor that keeps the heart centered amid pressure. Over time, awareness becomes internalized. The heart carries a quiet consciousness of God even in busy environments. External noise no longer dominates the inner world. The Spirit's presence is felt in movement, in conversation, and in decision-making. This internal awareness creates stability. Emotions no longer dictate direction. Inner peace becomes the guiding reference. Awareness also nurtures gratitude. When the Spirit's presence is acknowledged throughout the day, thankfulness rises naturally. Small victories are recognized. Subtle protections are appreciated. Guidance that once seemed coincidental is seen as intentional. Gratitude deepens awareness further, creating a cycle of recognition and response that strengthens spiritual connection. As awareness matures, trust deepens. The heart becomes confident in divine guidance, even when direction is subtle. There is less anxiety about making wrong choices because the relationship itself provides reassurance. The Spirit's presence becomes a compass rather than a map, guiding direction moment by moment rather than outlining every step in advance. Consistent awareness transforms spiritual life from effort to flow. Guidance is no longer sought only in crisis, but experienced in continuity. The Holy Spirit's influence becomes woven into thought patterns, values, and instincts. Life begins to reflect divine wisdom naturally, not through constant deliberation, but through inner alignment. In the state of awareness, ordinary moments carry sacred meaning. Waiting becomes purposeful. Silence becomes rich. Movement becomes intentional. The Holy Spirit's companionship is no longer an occasional comfort, but a continual reality, shaping daily life into an ongoing conversation with